Jordan Peterson and Nigel Farage have launched scathing criticism of the Green lobby over net zero, complaining that jobs are being exported to India and that in fact many of the claims made by the environmental lobby are complete and total nonsense. This video is from the Responsible Citizens Conference that took place today. I think it's pretty amazing, and I'm going to show you the video, not in full, but I'm going to let you watch a couple of minutes of it because I think it's superb. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, hit the bell notification icon. It's the best way to absolutely guarantee you get all my videos as soon as they are released. Well, I worry very, very greatly when we hear that our industry has to pay 6 times the amount that other countries have to pay in energy, that people are suffering from real poverty and really struggling to be able to pay their bills because of this crazed net zero, that we're not worried that granny is left out in the cold, well actually in the cold in many cases, and that actually our economy is falling behind. But it sounds like Jordan Peterson, who, sorry, doesn't sound like Kermit the Frog, but that's the best I can do, interviewed Nigel Farage today. Let's take a look at it.
And 14 years that saw net zero enshrined into law by a Conservative government and Boris Johnson, Theresa May, as evangelical about net zero as the current Ed Miliband. We take the view that if we're going to be using gas, if we're going to be using oil in this country till 2050, and even the most zealous net zero types accept we'll be using these commodities for years to come, our view is if we're going to be using them, we may as well produce them ourselves in our own country and genuinely become energy independent. And our platform is to reindustrialize Britain. We've closed down our steel industry. You know, we think closing down a steel industry is good because it means our national CO2 output is down. And all that happens is the plant closes in Redcar, the plant closes in South Wales, it reopens in India under lower environmental standards, and then the steel is shipped back to us. So let's produce all the stuff we need in this country. Let's become not just energy independent, we could actually become an energy exporter. Right now, every day we import 10 to 15% of our electricity, and our industrial energy prices are between 4 and 6 times higher than America. Not only that, but everybody out there, and of course this hurts the poor more than anybody, we've had 20% subsidies on domestic electricity bills going on now for the best part of 2 decades. And it's a truth that no one dares tell. So look, net zero is a complete and utter disaster. If you want to have energy production that is very, very low in carbon output, there is only one way ahead. That is small, modular, nuclear reactors, dozens of them all over the country. It's the only way forward.
Okay. Well,
it's the only way forward. And you know, if you look at the way the Far East produces nuclear energy, we can do it a damn sight cheaper than we've ever done it before.
Okay. Well, that warms a Canadian's heart. And it's good to get warm in a convention center that's this chilly because of the net zero restrictions. But let me push it a little bit, you know, because we have the opportunity to do that, and I think that it's time. You know, you talked about at least until 2050. And one of the things I've been discussing with my fellow Canadians, let's say, is the fact that, I mean, maybe it's time to stop our obsession with carbon altogether. And so I'm going to say something relatively radical, and let's just play this out and see how it goes. So, you know, I've reviewed a lot of scientific papers. Now, they're not climate papers, but I'm a reasonable hand at separating the wheat from the chaff on the scientific front. And when I look at the carbon data, there is one fact that leaps out to me in my experience with scientific data, is that there's usually 1 or 2 major facts and a bunch of trivial sub-facts that more or less you can ignore. As far as I can tell, the most stunning effect of carbon, atmospheric carbon, that has been recorded scientifically is the effect of carbon on plant growth. Right. And we know this. Look, in the last 25 years, thereabouts, 20% of the Earth's surface is greened. 20% is a lot. It's a lot. It's an area equivalent to twice the size of the continental US, so that gives you a quick picture of scale. And it's also primarily greened in semi-arid areas, because when you give plants more carbon dioxide, they're stomata-closed, and so they can live where it's drier. And so the deserts are shrinking, not growing, which is exactly the opposite of what we were told was going to happen. And crop yields are up, something approximating 10 to 13%. So that's not bad. That's good. And so I'm afraid that even throwing the dog a bone, let's say, and saying, well, we're certainly not going to hit our 2030 targets because they were proposed by buffoons and liars. We're not going to hit our 2050 targets either. I'm dead serious. This is not good. And so I'm curious about how far this needs to be taken. I have because I also think, conceivably, that the environmentalist climate scam was really an offshoot of the Club of Rome Malthusian stupidity that is predicated on the presumption that resources are finite and that there's far too many people on the planet, and there's a terrible anti-human motivation lurking underneath all of that that's pessimistic and brutal and genocidal in its fundamental ethos. And I think it's kind of time for people who would like energy to be inexpensive and reliable and there for the poor to just end it. It's like no more carbon apocalypse mongering and terrorizing. And so I guess I'm wondering what you think about that.
Well, the one thing that drives me absolutely potty is when I hear that carbon dioxide is a pollutant. Mm-hmm. That's what they tell us. That clearly is absolutely nuts. Now, there are times in our past when CO2 in the atmosphere has been much, much higher than it is today, and that's before people drove 4x4 Chelsea tractors. And I remember having this debate about 20 years ago. There was a man called Sir Patrick Moore.
Yes.
Very famous scientist, The Sky at Night, great character, very respected man. And I said to him about 20 years ago, I said, Patrick, what do you think about man's impact on the environment through CO2? He said, well, it's impossible to think man doesn't have some sort of impact. He said, but when it comes to carbon dioxide levels and when it comes to warming and cooling, he said, let me assure you that sunspot activity and underwater volcanic activity will always have a bigger impact on the environment than man himself ever can, and I very much stuck to that view. So I'm not a scientist. I can't tell you whether CO2 is leading to warming or not, but there are so many other massive factors. And Jordan, I was told that of all the CO2 that's produced every year in the world, only 3 to 5% of it is produced by mankind. So we do, as you rightly say, need to get this debate into a sense of perspective. And I sometimes think that the carbon dioxide hysteria has actually blinded us to other environmental disasters that are going on, such as the rape of our oceans and many other things. I'm an environmentalist in the old school sense and definition of that term. A bit more common sense, that's what we need.
Okay.
Well, I think that is absolutely extraordinary. You know, I didn't know all of that, and I don't claim to be a scientist, but that idea that in fact there is a regreening that's going on because of CO2, and there's a real question as to whether the Earth is bringing itself into its own equilibrium. And in any case, the carbon dioxide being produced is not being produced by humans, or rather we're a minor part of it. I find it really, really worrying, but I thought there was an interesting point that Jordan Peterson made, and I think it's really important. And it's this Thomas Malthus, the Malthusian disaster. Thomas Malthus is, you know, largely forgotten because of his stupid ideas, unlike the Luddites. He believed that if the human population got to, I think it was 100 million, then we'd all die of starvation. He didn't understand technological advancement, and I just wonder how many people actually are supporters of Thomas Malthus but don't really realise it because he's been so badly discredited. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please do subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.